How many of you know what's written on my shirt? Well, the song is referenced by a very famous person and it's a very famous song itself. But how many of you know how the song starts? It starts with a video, and the video depicts the definition of a feminist, and the author of this speech is none other than Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, the subject of my speech today. Now, there are several things which Africa as a whole is known for. A small country in East Africa is known for producing world-class athletes and is also the birthplace of Oscar-winning actress Lupita Nyong'o. South Africa has also contributed to world history, politics, leadership, you name it, by giving us the incomparable Nelson Mandela. And if you look through the list on Forbes, you can see a long list of celebrities, including Mad Max actress Charlize Theron. But I'm not here to talk about all these prominent people, just to add on to that list, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Now, according to Wikipedia, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is a Nigerian writer of novels, short stories, and non-fiction. According to her own website, she is a wife, a sister, a mother, and a friend. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie has shaped the debate on race, gender, politics, oppression, and Africa as a whole. Therefore, going back to that Beyoncé song, Chimamanda was giving a speech on feminism and what it means to be a feminist. She has changed the rhetoric from an angry black woman back to the true essence of feminism, which is believing in the social, economic, and political equality of the sexes. I am going to address who she is, her background, and her achievements, the awards she has received, and the impact her work has done on the subjects race, gender, Africa oppression, and religion. Now, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie was born in 1977 in Enugu, Nigeria. She is the fifth of 6 children. Her father was a professor of statistics and her mother was the first female registrar. So she comes from a long line of, not a long line, but she comes from a reputable family, educated highly as well. Now, she received her bachelor's degree from University of Nigeria. She went to the University of Nigeria for medicine and pharmacy for 3 years. However, in her last year, she left when she was 19 to the USA, to Drexel University, where she received her degree for communications and political science. She then went on to get her master's in creative writing from Johns Hopkins, and didn't just stop there. She got a Hodder Fellowship at Princeton University in the academic year 2005 to 2006. She got another master's at Yale in 2008 in African Studies. She got a MacArthur Fellowship, which is one of the most prestigious awards to ever be awarded, in 2008, and she also got a fellowship at the Radcliffe Institute at Harvard in 2011. So as you can see, she's been very busy academic-wise. She's also been honored with 3 honorary degrees from Johns Hopkins, her alma mater, and Haverford College and University of Edinburgh. And in this time as well, she also had a very strong publishing career. Started in 1997 with the publishing of a short stories book called Decisions. And then 2003, she published Purple Hibiscus, which we shall discuss later on, Half of a Yellow Sun in 2006, and The Thing Around Your Neck, 2009. And the list goes on and on and on. Some of the awards that she has come to receive in her lifetime was Americana. One of her books was named as one of the 10 best books of 2013. She's also been listed as one of the most 100 influential people by Time magazine in 2015, and most recently, Fortune magazine lists her as in the list of top 50 world leaders in 2017. Now, lastly, let's talk about the impact of her work and what she has done to contribute to the subject, as I've said earlier. First of all is Africa, Religion and Oppression. Now, the book Purple Hibiscus, in short, is about these 2 characters, Jaja and her sister, who grew up in a very staunch Catholic family, and their father Eugene is a staunch Catholic who believes in being first in everything, and there's no joy or laughter or the exuberance of the exuberance show of emotion, let's say, in their household because of this religion. And this is a book that very many people can relate to, not only because you're African or you've grown up in a Christian home, but even if you have no knowledge, or rather no experience with any of this subject, you can relate to it in terms of the fact that you want to dispel your own ignorance on African culture or what it is like to grow up in such a home. And which is why Purple Hibiscus has really reverberated among people. We can also talk about Half of a Yellow Sun, which depicted the war, the Biafran War in Nigeria. It was a time of great political turmoil, but she managed to humanize the stories that other people could understand what it was like for her and her family to live through that, and it's also been made into a movie. We also have this lecture, one of the most TED Talks ever watched, with over 5 million views, I believe, to this point, which is The Danger of a Single Story. In The Danger of a Single Story, she expresses her concern for the underrepresentation of various cultures within Africa and outside of Africa as well. She explains that when she was young herself, she often read American and British stories, and the characters were mainly Caucasian or white-skinned, and therefore she believed that people like her, people of a dark color, dark skin tone, did not belong in literature, and that sort of put her down because she was very interested in such. And in her own words, when she moved to the US, she says, "My roommate had a single story of Africa, a single story of catastrophe, and in this single story, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to her in any way. And therefore, her roommate was surprised that she could speak so eloquently and quote the writers in the books and the novels that she was quoting." And so this is very important because knowing only one side of a story and sticking to that narrative not only dehumanizes a person, but it hinders you from seeing other aspects of people as well. Next, we can talk about race, and one of the greatest books, in my opinion, of course, that she's ever written was Americana, which is about this, the transition from moving from your own country to a different country, in this case of a young African girl moving to America and the love of her life moving to Europe, and how that transition affects them in terms of you learning you're not just a person, but labels are put on you and you're expected to live up to those labels. And her personally, she had great experience in this, moving from being an African to an African American, and the differences between the two, because she was too light skinned to be just African, and then she's too black though to be African American, and she's expected to understand the anger that African Americans feel towards Caucasian people because of the oppression that they've gone through. Yet she did not directly go through that oppression, yet sometimes her sympathy was not seen as sympathy, or empathy was seen as being misplaced, because they would look at her and be like, well, you don't know what it's like, you haven't gone through it. And she would accept that, but she wouldn't know how to express it in such a way that would be acceptable. Lastly, we have gender, which the biggest impact I believe she's had was the two things: we should all be feminists, in which she shares her experience of being an African feminist and her views on gender construction and sexuality. And lastly was Dear Ejawele, which is a letter response to a childhood friend who'd asked her how to raise a child to be a feminist. In this book, she dispels notions of the gender roles, especially in the African community, where women are supposed to stay in the kitchen and excuse me, men are expected to be breadwinners and sort of hold the woman up. And she tells her friend to raise her child to ask for a helicopter as easy as she would ask for a doll, if that is what she would wish, and not to aspire to be likable not just by men or women, but to be not only a nice person at heart, but to her first obligation is to herself, to be true to herself. And that, in essence, is where the feminist rules comes from. So, in conclusion, now that you know all this about this amazing person and what she has done, when you find yourself among a group of factually challenged people or those who know little to nothing of Africa, with the exception of the stereotypical narrative of sprawling savannah and starving children, of course, you can raise your voice and recall one or two things about the life and works of one of Africa's greatest literary heroes, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.